And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight for the Great British Isles. It's draft week, it's finally here. Another two picks in the top 12, and nobody really seems to have a clue what the Texans are going to do. But we're going to just tee you up very briefly this week. And if you've got time to listen to it the 4 days before it kicks off on Thursday night. But I'm joined by Oliver Hodgkinson from Pro Football Network. Join us for a second year in a row. Ollie, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Lovely to be back. Really enjoyed talking about the Texans draft last year, and I'm looking forward to getting into this year's class. One of the more interesting teams in 2023 draft class for the Texans.
Yeah, well, I think that last year I was listening back to some of the points we made, and some we were pretty close on, I think, and then others we were less so. But how have you found this year's process? I know you're going through a bit of a change, working more on college focus, but how have you found this process, and how would you sort of kind of view this draft class from a top line view?
It's really interesting because it's a class that has been I feel like from a national media and international media consensus, the kind of a class that has been derided for not being that great. But I think we turned the page onto this draft class pretty much as soon as 2022 NFL draft finished, and I think when you spend that much time working on these players, studying these players, watching throughout the college football season as well, you realise there is talent in this class, and there's some really like the cornerback position, for example, is extremely talented. I think it's a great edge class. I think there's a lot of good offensive tackle talent. Obviously, the quarterbacks are going to dominate the conversation, especially for a team like the Texans. So it's a talented class. Has it got some of the blue chip talent that we've seen in previous years? Maybe not. But I'm very excited to see how it pans out because I think it's got the potential for absolute chaos, like you alluded to. Then is no one really seems to know what's going to happen on
Mm.
Thursday, and I think that's great. Like that makes for that makes for exciting um, coverage, and that's what the NFL draft is meant to be. It's meant to be exciting, and so I can't wait for the Panthers to be on the clock, and that'll dictate the direction from then on out.
Yeah, and I think they've got tighter on, or certainly I think there's more direction from the Shield about making this as alluring as possible. I think because you've kind of got that. It was at the Baker Mayfield draft, was it? It came out common knowledge that he was going number one in that week. Now that was a bit of a departure or a change of what people necessarily anticipated running up, and I was like, yeah, you could argue quite comfortably. I think it wasn't the right call for them to make with John Dorsey and the Browns at that time. But I think certainly there is an expectation that one overall is one of two guys. I think that's safe to say. I don't think that takes any expert or great deal of study to suggest that. But what I think would be really interesting is the Texans have literally been the talk of pretty much the whole league of an inflection point of the draft. And obviously nobody knows where it's going. You can't really go on bookmakers odds because they're aggregates. And I saw actually somebody tweet that out today. It was Albert Breer just said GMs don't funnel information to Vegas because for their own benefit. Those are illegal. So I think so the people like to you take all these different. So it's gone from definitely being Stroud at one to therefore Bryce Young being your only guy left. Then it's gone from talking about Tyree Wilson. Then it's gone to Will Anderson's a safe prospect now. They might trade back, they might not. They might take Will Levis. Will Levis has dropped for two. So when you add it all up, I don't think anybody's got a freaking clue what's going to happen to come Thursday night. From your view, what would you think? Or from your view, what would you think would be an advisable pick at two? Just say they stay there and pick.
I think it's interesting. This is why I say the Texans are one of the more interesting picks in the whole draft class because I think from an outside perspective, it very much feels like the Davis Mills experiment isn't going to be the long term path to success. So that almost immediately, and when you bring in a new head coach as well, you bring in a guy like D'Amico Ryans, you want to immediately put your stamp on the program with a new guy at the quarterback position regardless of who you are as a coach and what your philosophies are as a coach, the quarterback is the most important position in sport in the NFL certainly, and you hitch your wagon to the quarterback when you're a head coach. So D'Amico Ryans is kind of he's going to want his guy. The Houston Texans as an organization, like I say, I can't for any stretch of the imagination, imagine that they are sold on Davis Mills being the long-term future. But then when you look at it as you've got two top 12 picks, like we talked about, do you take your best player available, which could be a Tyree Wilson, like you alluded to, or a Will Anderson, and then see what's cracking at pick 12? Because if you're not super sold on what we're imagining is going to be CJ Stroud for the Houston Texans, that sounds like it's going to be the option. There's a lot of, and you, like you rightly so said, avoid the bookmakers as an analysis tool, but all the direction seems to be pointing towards Bryce Young, rightly or wrongly, as being the Carolina Panthers pick. So if you're the Texans at 2 and you're not sold on CJ Stroud, or you're not sold on Will Levis, excuse me, and we'll get to Will Levis later on, I think. You take the best player available, which may be Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson on the Texans board. We just don't know. You've got a defensive minded coach. You look at the history of the Houston Texans and when they've been most successful, and it's when they've been super strong on defense. You know, guys like JJ Watt, guys like Brian Cushing from the linebacker position. When the Texans have been good, it's because they've been solid on defense. They've been terrifying on defense, for want of a better phrase. And you could achieve that with Will Anderson or with Tyree Wilson. And when you think about the setup of the Houston Texans defense, a guy like Tyree Wilson, and there's been a lot of smoke about Tyree Wilson, his size, his strength, his sheer athleticism kind of does fit what you can imagine the Texans are going to want to do under Meco Ryans. Whereas Will Anderson is a smaller guy. I love Will Anderson. I think he's the best player in this class, but he is a smaller guy, and a lot of teams' draft boards are made on how players fit their teams. And I think Tyree Wilson is a good fit for the Houston Texans. I think they have to go quarterback. I love CJ Stroud, and I think he's, for me, my best quarterback in this class. And if he's available, I don't see why you would let him go past. But there's certainly plenty of options for the Texans when they're on the clock at 2 and at 12.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, and the way I view it sometimes, Ollie, is like it's about managing risk, and the risk is less so if you're picking from number 1. Now they blew that at the end of last season, and yeah, bygones be bygones at this stage. Still kind of stings a little, to be honest. But I think when you think about managing risk, if you think any of these top 5 guys, right down to Hendon Hooker, who's injured or what have you, if you think any of them are good enough to be a franchise passer, you have to take them at 2, in my view, because if you are convinced, and they obviously aren't, if you're not convinced at 2, you shouldn't be convinced at 12. And ultimately, I think you take best player available at 12 because you have 11 teams in front of you. Well, 10 teams in front of you because you pick at 2. 10 teams in front of you at 2 that will determine, unless you trade up. And we're not really in a position to be giving away picks. We need to acquire maximum assets because, again, it's all a risk. 50% hit rate at best in the first round. So you can't really let a guy slide by you at 2 for a defensive end who you've either got an option of, okay, he's undersized and might not be the perfect scheme fit, and then you've got Tyree Wilson, just like they picked Derek Stingley last year, again, a risk. You don't want to incur additional risk by picking a guy who's had 2 season-ending injuries and we're not quite sure where he is, fully healthy, fully cleared, etc. So I don't think you could pick the 2 at 2nd overall and the 3rd overall spot back-to-back with health risks. I just don't see that as being a feasible position. Therefore, Anderson, D'Amico Ryans is a former Alabama linebacker. He's probably in his head the perfect pick, but necessarily is the club, I think, split on is CG Stroud necessarily the guy to pick. And in your opinion, based on this West Coast play action zone running scheme, which gives a lot of easy layup throws like Stroud had at the 2nd level, should he be the pick there? What would you say is the biggest knock on not taking Stroud?
The biggest pick on not taking him.
Yeah. What's the doubt?
What's the
What's the
reason?
doubt that's set in? Yeah, in the building. What would you
Well,
say?
I mean, for me, it's difficult to see with CJ Stroud as to what the issues are. Now, it, it was only we only really saw his true potential as an NFL quarterback in that college football playoff semifinal game against Georgia. So there is that, and that's been the knock on him throughout the process. Is he's not as athletic as Bryce Young, and certainly not as athletic as Anthony Richardson, and he doesn't grind out the yards as a runner like Will Levis. Well, that Georgia game, I think there was everything in the Georgia game again from CJ Stroud to allay those fears. There's the scout helmet scouting. Ohio State quarterbacks can't play in the NFL, but it's a lazy take. It's a lazy take to throw that against CJ Stroud. When I look at CJ Stroud, I think he's a kid who has consistently overcome everything that's thrown at him in his college career. You know, early in his time at Ohio State, when a couple of games at the start of his career when he came in to take over from Justin Fields, and everyone was like, "Oh, CJ Stroud ain't it," and he battled back and he showcased that he's this incredible quarterback talent. Um, but I think the cognition test results that
Mm.
came out where he scored so lowly has really been thrown at him as well, especially as the lazy take is that Ohio State quarterbacks can't read the offense, can't work an offense and read a defense at an NFL level, and then you come out with these test results. It's just a part of the evaluation, the same as the combines are part of the evaluation, and you can't throw your full weight of how you evaluate and scout a prospect on one solitary metric. For
Mm.
me, and I think, like I said, I think CJ Stroud is a better NFL prospect than Bryce Young, and I really like Bryce Young. That's not a knock on Bryce at all. But I think you look at CJ Stroud, he's got the size, he's got the arm talent, he's shown that he can have the creative capacity, he's shown that he has got the athleticism to grind out the yardage when needs be as a mobile creator. And he's shown for me that he can read full field at the college football level, and that translates to the NFL level. So I think you put Davis Mills and you put CJ Stroud side by side, and that's your options for 2023. I don't see that there's even a conversation to be had there, really.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I think Mills was always going to be limited. And look, I don't think they did him any favours last year. Would he probably play better in the system? Yeah, I think every quarterback does. I think there's a proven record of that. But can you sustainably go into this season with the fanfare and the positivity, I suppose, you've built up with D'Amico Ryans? Is that deflated by not taking a quarterback? And I think the answer absolutely is. I think if you dice with danger and wait till 12, then we'll wait and see for it. I think look ultimately if they can trade out of two, and you kick the can down for the road for a year, but yet you get additional players, that's kind of for me a justification of doing so. It's not one I would necessarily take on, because ultimately, if you hit on all those three players, you say, "Well, I built up a roster, and then therefore next year we'll go back at the big two coming through for the guys from South Carolina and USC." But that's one thing I want to ask you: are those two guys worth waiting for, and is the risk worth taking?
Well, this was what I was going to say because it is a risk every year, and it feels like every year that this conversation is had in scouting circles in the media between analysts. It feels like every year is the next year um,
Yeah.
for the quarterback position, and we've seen it this year. Now everyone's picked apart Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson and Will Levis to the point now where we're thinking, oh, we'll move on to next year because Caleb Williams and Drake May are going to be so much better. And I bet this time next year we're having the same conversation. I really like Caleb Williams. There is limitations is not the right word. There's things he needs to work out and he needs to show in this coming season for USC. I don't think he's this all world NFL draft prospect right now, but he's got another year to work on it. And it's the same with Drake May. And Drake May he'll be get hit with the North Carolina Mitchell Trubisky lazy scouting criticisms when we get
Mm.
to this point next year. It's always a risk, like you say. The NFL draft is a risk. It's a crapshoot at the end of the day, and you can't just bank on waiting another year because tomorrow might never come for the Texans. And if they can take a guy like CJ Stroud at two, I think their options to trade back, by the way, I think are exceptionally limited just because
Mm.
of Arizona being in the position they are. Now, if Arizona were a team that needed a quarterback, I think the Texans trade um, capital and the how they can pivot that to pick to another team because there's a lot of teams that do need quarterbacks. But it feels like Arizona's kind of that three hole shot to get ahead of the Indianapolis Colts, whereas
Mm.
I don't think there's going to be a super amount of teams clamoring to get up to two, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I think so. I mean, I did see there was a rumor the Vikings were, and it's all bullshit. Let's be honest. But it's fun. It's fun to make permutations of it rather, for it. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, look, are they going to trade back to, and is somebody going to give up? And to get up that high is quite far. Actually, I think they'd probably be better trading out at 12. And who knows? Who knows what's going to happen at one? But I think taking another player like Wilson is an injury risk, and I think if you can trade back any of those spots and gather assets, and then for perhaps one, if you get a first for next year, that maybe gives you the belief that you can go and then make the move that you have, because no team will have 3 first round picks in theory. What can happen, but I think people are erring away from those big trades because not many of them have worked out for a prolonged period of time. We'll see where the Watson goes. Where the Watson trade goes for Cleveland, but ultimately we're year two of three of this dividend or yield that you've got from them. So we'll see. But they've got to start paying back. I think that's the big thing. Nick Caserio has to start picking quality players. Now, we talked about, or you touched on earlier, lack of blue chip players. I saw a quote in the Albert Breer column today, which I always read pre-draft, and I encourage you to tweet it out today if you've not read it. But ultimately, he said there was a quote from a GM, anonymous quote. Again, take it with a pinch of salt, what you will. But ultimately, there is a limitation of top end true first round grade players, and he listed them as Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, and Bijan Robinson. Plus, take your pick of the quarterbacks in there. Once you get past that sphere of players, some may or may not be there at 12. Depending on which quarterbacks go. In a world, for example, where if you push the quarterbacks to one side, because we'll come back to them before we round this bit off, of those guys you mentioned, is there anyone that's missing, or would you say there's a standout there that the Texans ideally would want to be there at 12 should they sit there and pick?
Yeah, I didn't hear the name Lucas Van Ness mentioned there, and Lucas Van Ness is an interesting one. I paired him up with the Texans in my latest 3-round NFL mock draft, and he's a guy who has garnered a lot of early first round talk, despite not being a starter at Iowa. That's kind of I love the Lucas Van Ness didn't start at Iowa narrative, because it's objectively it's true, but it's also hilariously wrong in that he played a hell of a lot of snaps for Iowa, as much as you would expect from a starter. He just wasn't the starter, which is hilarious. But he's a big, strong, imposing, powerful defensive end who's got a lot of potential, a lot of athletic upside. Who I think could be there for the Texans and would make for a great pick. The thing with the first round, the blue chip quality player, is people get lulled into a false sense of security that there's 32 picks. Obviously, there's only 31 picks this year, but there's ordinarily 32 picks in the first round. So there must be 32 first round players, and that isn't the case in most draft years. And this draft class is no exception. And for specific teams, they will have guys who aren't first round players on their board because they simply do not fit what they want to do on the respective side of the football, whether it's defensively or offensively. Which is, it makes for a fascinating study into the NFL draft, because you and I might be talking about a guy who we think should go in the first round, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a first round player.
Yeah, and I think you've got a guy like Miles Murphy going at 10 above that. What do you think of Murphy? I know certainly John Harris, who works for the Texas Opinion, I trust heard on the show quite a few times. He thinks a lot of Murphy. Would he be a guy? What's the drop off between Wilson and Anderson to Murphy? It's probably a good way to put it.
I think the drop off comes purely on the fact that Miles Murphy at this point in his development isn't as refined as Will Anderson and isn't quite as athletic as Tyree Wilson, but he tested incredibly well at the Clemson Pro Day. At this moment in time, he is a defensive end who wins solely with his combination of strength, size, and speed. I think there's a lot of development potential for him in how he puts together pass rush moves and combos. But he's another guy that comes off the Clemson defensive end factory who should go in the first round and could go early. The pro day testing, I think, really has helped Miles Murphy. I think those guys, Miles Murphy and Brian Breesy, both Clemson guys, they kind of felt like there was like they were dropping a little bit out of the conversation and out of contention right at the top of the class or even in the first round. I think both of those guys should go in the first round. And for the Texans, I think if Brian Brees is a guy that's still there at 33, he's a guy you could plug in on your interior of your defensive line as well.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I think any of these positions, there is so many needs on this team. I think that's for fair to say. Just on the cornerbacks, if the tech you've got Christian Gonzalez going first off the board in terms of cornerbacks, I believe. What sort of level, if you compare, say you had Stingley and Sauce coming out last year, where is he in that tier, or do you see him a tier below that? Is it more strength and depth this class?
I think there's strength and depth in this class. I honestly believe it. And you look at guys like Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. I think we can both probably sit here and say that Derek Stingley hasn't been quite as productive, as exciting, as impactful as the Texans clearly thought they were getting at three. Sauce Gardner, on the other hand, has been incredible. I think Gonzalez has got the potential to come in and have that level of impact somewhere between the Gardner and the Stingley level of impact for an NFL team as a rookie. Everything about him screams long-term lockdown cornerback in the NFL. He's the size, the length, the speed, but it's the fluidity of movement with Christian Gonzalez. There's few players who are as fluid, and he possesses that football intelligence. He routinely puts himself in the right place to make plays, and all that comes together to make a cornerback who. Would you have taken him if you were picking at three? If he was in last year's class, maybe not. But I think he's solidly in that sort of 5, 6, 7, 8. I can't see him. If I did a mock draft with the Jeff Reinbold show yesterday where Christian Gonzalez was still there at the 14th pick, and I was absolutely flabbergasted because I just don't see how a guy of his talent falls that far when there's teams that are picking like the Detroit Lions, like the Las Vegas Raiders, who could potentially take a cornerback. The Seattle Seahawks, I wouldn't rule out the Seahawks picking there at 5. They could take a cornerback as well. So yeah, he's a top 10 guy for me. I think it would be a shock to see him fall beyond the midway point of the first round.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for Stingley because he was asked to play zone and then he only played 12 games, and when he and you could see him learning to play zone. And I think obviously his strengths are man cover corner. Interesting. Caserio's philosophy has been built from the back end of the defense back to front, and potentially that's an option. Pick 73 in your third round mock draft is a later round option. It's Hodgins. I'm not going to pronounce his first name, but Hodges Tomlinson from TCU. There's a capital V and and a single apostrophe there. But anyway,
Travius Hodges Tomlinson.
Travius, yeah, bit of an unusual spelling of that. But anyway, as they often can be at times. But is he a guy I've seen kind of talked about a fair bit? What does he offer late in the round, for example? Is he the kind of potential sort of second round talent that people are saying you can get in the third round this year? Is that how deep the cornerback class is?
There's a combination of that. There's a combination of size issues as well, because the kid comes in at 5'9", and obviously there's a number of cornerbacks that are that size, and there's the immediate question mark over, well, can they play outside in the NFL at that size? I think Travius Hodges Tomlinson he's aggressive, he's physical. He's also, like we mentioned with Gonzalez, he's fluid, his athletic ability, sideline to sideline range. He's an absolute dog, really. When you look at him on the football field, like Clark Phillips out of Utah as well. These two smaller cornerbacks who I think consistently play bigger than their size. Travis Hodges-Tomlinson is extremely sticky in man coverage as well. And he's the sort of guy that you can plug him in as a nickelback, but you wouldn't feel too uncomfortable about him being a liability for you if you were to play him on the outside as well. And if you're picking a cornerback in the third round who's got the production, has the talent, this is a kid who won the Jim Thorpe Award the defensive back of the year at college football level. Like he's no smoke at 5'9" either. So I think he's a playmaker that you could pick up in the third round just purely because he's a smaller cornerback. That's extremely good value.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's certainly a position you can have enough of. In terms of the wide receiver class, I think the people or the onlookers at large via the media have perhaps come round to the fact that this perhaps isn't necessarily the elite talent at wide receiver. A lot of undersized guys, not necessarily a prototypical X, which the Texans are looking for. You've got Quinton Johnson, who potentially is that mould. Some kind of elements of his game are questioned. Obviously, displayed his game on the national stage. Right through with TCU's run this year in college football. He drops to 33. Do you see any guys going in the first round apart from Smith and Jigba that are going to necessarily be locks? There's obviously Trey Flowers and Jalen Hyatt, pace guys, all speed guys on the perimeter often seem to kind of get taken up quickly. But if it's not Johnson at 33, what do you make of this class for a team that desperately need to fill wide receiver spot at least one out of the 12 picks should they take 12?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this has been so widely derided, the wide receiver class, because I think there is a lot of playmakers in this class who can make an impact. Now, there's not an elite. You take Jackson Smith and Jigba out of the question. There's not an elite blue chip high, top tier, top 10 pick like we have had in recent years. And I think that's part of the problem is there's a tendency to judge each draft class against the previous one or what we've had in the last 5 years, for example. And you're not every year going to produce, 4 or 5 guys who can go potentially in the top 16, 20 picks of the NFL draft at the wide receiver position. It's just not going to happen. But I think there's a lot of great talent. I had, like I say, I had Quentin Johnston fall to 33 in the mock draft. There is some noise about people, about teams having some concerns over him. It's not out of the possibility that teams will wait until the second round as well to snag a snag a wide receiver, sorry. And, you've got guys like Quentin Johnson. You mentioned Jalen Hyatt. You brought up Jalen Hyatt. I really like Cedric Tillman, his teammate. I think you mentioned the risk of picking a guy who's coming off an injury, and obviously he did lose time last season, did miss time last season. But I think he's a better wide receiver prospect in this class than Jalen Hyatt. He's got the size. He's no slouch himself in terms of being a straight line athlete. But a lot of what he does to win on the football field doesn't necessarily, depend on him being able to be a straight line burner. Throttles down well, changes direction well. He's reliable. He's got a reliable set of hands. I think Cedric Tillman, if he was there at 33, that's a guy that the Texans should really have their eye on, because he can play that, like you say, he can play that prototypical X role in the Houston Texans offense. But you're going to get these big-bodied guys like later on in the class as well. If they wanted to wait it out until like round 5, even the last stages of day 3 that can make an impact. You're obviously not going to get a guy who's going to be an instant impact maker and an instant starter. There's going to be talent there to put on the roster because it's not just a case of finding a starter. You've got to find some depth as well.
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of the top sort of 3 or 4 picks in the second round, they potentially bear fruits, more often than not. I think it is a sweet spot, so it'll be intrigue there. Pick 65 overall, the only one we haven't touched on. Luke Weipler, centre, Ohio State, day 1 starter. Yep.
I think there's 3 guys in this centre class who can be day 1 starters, and that's John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, it's Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin, and it's Luke Whippler out of Ohio State. But again, there's some guys in the later rounds as well. If you were looking for a guy to develop, Alex Forsyth out of Oregon, he's a good. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Probably one of the biggest things in the team underrated, I think, this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the thing with centre position is as well, those 2 guys at the top, John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tippmann, they will be there in the second round, because the NFL has proven time and time again that there's not a super sort of value placed on the centre position in the draft. So you look at 33, and that could be an option there with one of those 2 guys.
Who's the guy in this class, Ollie, that is your favourite guy and you'd be delighted to watch his progress and see where he goes, that you potentially, maybe he's not got the love elsewhere?
There's a couple of guys. Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State, for a guy who
Yeah.
is the NCAA record holder for interception touchdowns. His play backs up the stats. That's what that gets me with Emmanuel Forbes. If this kid weighed 190 pounds, we'd be talking about him as slam dunk first round pick. He's very slender, and I think that's the knock on him. I really like Emmanuel Forbes. BJ Ojolari out of LSU, the edge rusher. I don't think there's many pass rushers in this class who combine the explosiveness that BJ Ojolari possesses, but also he's already an NFL pass rusher in terms of his pass rush toolbox and his intelligence to combine moves and to counter moves. Didn't test very well at the combine. Turns out he was injured, but a lot of people already write him off because of that. I look at Emmanuel Forbes and BJ Ojolari on the defensive side, and then wide receiver is Jaden Reed. And I know Jaden Reed has taken a top 30 visit with the Texans, which would be a great snag for them because he's a guy who is incredibly fast, incredibly elusive in the open field, but a very underrated pass catcher at the point as well for me. He's very reliable, great body control, good ball tracking, timing of his of jumping to snag the ball out of the air, really good pass catching technique. A lot of people just view him as a gimmick, and he definitely isn't that.
If Bijan Robinson hits 12, can you any team say no?
Well, if he's hit 12, plenty of people will have said no because he's a top five
Or can a
prospect.
bad team say no? How about that?
I'd be intrigued to see what the Philadelphia Eagles like. They see him like a natural fit for Bijan Robinson, and it would be a terrifying fit for the rest of the NFL as well. But they don't value the running back position in the first round. They don't value a lot of positions in the first round. To be fair, I think the Texans need too much to take Bijan, if that makes sense.
It's a bit of a luxury.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. You could take Jahmyr Gibbs in the second round. You could, there's options. I don't think the Texans have got the luxury or the offensive line for Bijan Robinson to come in and be instantly successful. Unfortunately,
if Bryce isn't there and Stroud is not the flavor, which one of the other three do you think justifies either 2 or 12? And you think you can see from what you've seen has the chance to be a franchise quarterback?
It's Anthony Richardson for me. If it's not one of of Young or Stroud, just because his frame, his build, his athleticism. You're a Texans fan, you know what they did to David Carr. If you're a quarterback coming into the NFL, you're expected to start straight away, and you're a high pick, it's probably because the offensive line that's in front of you is not great, and that's why a team is picking so highly. Anthony Richardson's got the frame to stand up to the rigors of the NFL. He's got the athleticism to be able to escape the pocket. He's got a lot of people don't talk about how well Anthony Richardson manipulates the pocket with his movement. There's a lot to work on in terms of how he manipulates, in reading coverage, how he manipulates the safety by looking, that sort of thing. But he manipulates the pocket very well. His pocket composure is good. His athleticism to escape the pocket is great. You need that. You're going to need that as a rookie star in the NFL. And then he's obviously the arm talent is incredible as well. So I think between those three, I wouldn't pick Will Levis at 2 or 12 personally. I'm not sold on him in going forward. I think Hendon Hooker, you mentioned about Derek Stingley and the injury. That's going to be a concern for teams. He's an older rookie as well, which may be a concern for teams. I do like Hendon Hooker's game. I don't like it well enough to be a 1 to 16 back end of the first round. If you want to get a fifth year option on a quarterback, that's probably the time to take Hendon Hooker for me. If you're not worried about that fifth year, early in the second maybe, but Will Levis doesn't move the needle for me, especially at 2 or 12.
Yeah, no, I think that is fair in terms of the assessment. So night one, nobody really knows where it's going to go. The intrigue is probably starts at 2. Any sneaky predictions or feelings you've got that might happen that you want to put out there before it all unfolds?
Well, for the Texans,
or generally, yeah.
Well, I think it seems fairly certain that Bryce Young is going to be the guy at 1. I think you have to take CJ Stroud at 2. If you look at who the Texans have bought in on top 30 visits. Cornerback, I don't think he's out of the question at 12 if one of those guys is there. They bought in Deontay Banks out of Maryland. They bought in Julius Brents out of Kansas State, who could be a sneaky back end of the first round pick. If we want to play predictions, let's go with that. I think Julius Brents maybe becomes the first round pick. Let's go with that as a sneaky prediction. But I think more than the one wide receiver goes day one, because that's been a common perception that just one wide receiver goes day one. I think more than one wide receiver goes. But yeah, I think Anthony Richardson to the Colts. I'd like to book that in Penn as well. I don't think there's a better fit, quarterback fit, scheme fit than Anthony Richardson and the Indianapolis Colts.
And that's the biggest thing that I think, regardless of the talent evaluation is there or not, whether it works out long term, the focus in the immediacy, if you miss or you don't take one of these guys and they go to the Colts, or one even makes it to Tennessee, and you got to see that twice this year. The short-term view for Nick Caserio, and this is a career-defining draft as it pertains to the Texans job, and not many GMs get second jobs out of it. That's going to really put a focus this decision. But it's fascinating stuff. Ollie, thank you very much for your time. We just want to do a quick run through just to keep you going before the draft kicks off this week. But any final words before we shoot out here?
I really appreciate you having me on. Always enjoy coming on, talking to Texans. Looking forward to seeing them, see what happens at 2.
As long as we get a couple of starters and something to hold on to, some foundations built out, then it's a start. And I think Meco has got a bit of a free rein on this big contract. It's just whether Caserio is going to be here to pick along with him. I think that is the question. But thank you again for listening, everybody. Thanks to Ollie for his time. We'll be back at some point, potentially the Monday following the draft. Thanks again for listening to